In the event that the power goes out and you need a way to cook, do you know what one piece of kit that every pantry needs to have in it? I'm guessing some of you might not even know if there was only one thing that's going to replace that Instapot, that microwave, the oven, the stovetop, everything in one piece. Well, stick around because in the next few minutes, I'm going to tell you how to use a Dutch oven, which is going to be your very best friend in the event of a power outage. Go get it out of the closet, bring it out, dust that thing off, and meet me around the corner. Before we get started, I want you to already know on the front end, we're not making anything from scratch today. The purpose of this episode is to show you how to use a Dutch oven if you've never used it before, or just haven't done it enough that you can remember how to do it very well. It's pretty important. You wouldn't get into a Maserati and think you were going to go anywhere if you didn't know where the ignition was. And it's the same way with that Dutch oven. A little bit different technology, but you need to know how to use it before a crisis comes when you're forced to use it and you're clueless in that event what's going on. So here's just the 101 primer. And for this, to get started, I want to encourage you, go ahead and make this as easy on yourself as you possibly can, all right? What I'm saying is, I want you to, because on the Dutch oven, it's important for you to be able to regulate the heat. I don't want you to just take it out and camp over a campfire the very first time. It's very difficult to know how much heat you've got on top or on bottom or around it in that situation. So we're going to start with charcoal briquettes. The reason why we do that is partly because you can play with them and learn exactly how to place the heat and how much you need and where it goes on top or on the bottom and sides. And you can kind of gauge by the number of charcoal briquettes that you use just how much the temperature is going to be in the oven itself. It's a pretty good little system. So get yourself some charcoal briquettes. And I'm going to encourage you, get the ones that light automatically, should say instant light, right on the front of the package. I want you to get the kind that are regular, not special mesquite or any kind of hardwood, partly because we're doing a Dutch oven, which is enclosed. It doesn't need to have special smells and tastes that are infused into it through specialty briquettes. And also, I would say, the hardwood briquettes like mesquite or such are going to burn at different temperatures. And so we just want to learn on the very basic, just the 101 version today. So regular briquettes, instant light, get yourself a regular lighter that isn't fancy. I don't want you to try and use a ferro rod or that bow drill to light the fire on this one. And I want you to get something that's probably pre-made, that's very simple for you to light. Today I'm going to be using these little tumbleweeds, and they are all natural fire starters, and it's going to actually be like a little nest that's pre-made, pre-infused with goodness that's going to help burn for about 12 minutes. So you're going to have time for all of those briquettes to gain that fire that's going to go burn down through them, okay? These are just things that make it easier for you. Now, we're going to use a pre-made pie. That's right. I want you to know how to bake a pie, partly because a pie is perfectly round. It fills up almost the right amount of space inside so that you're going to be able to learn just where the heat needs to be to get this perfectly cooked. Also, I don't want you to ruin something that's homemade by putting a whole lot of effort into it and then ruining something on your first try out of the chute. So, a pie from the store is going to cost you maybe about $4 or $5, and it's an easy one that's probably going to taste good even if it's burnt a little bit, but it's also going to not be a huge mistake if you end up messing it all up and not being able to use it at all. For our purposes today, we're just going to lay out tin foil on a very flat surface that can handle heat. You can see I'm here on cement, which is perfect for this. If you find yourself in an urban environment, that's probably what you have to work with. But if you don't have a cement patio, go out into the gravel. We could have even done this out in the grass or along a creek bank. As long as you have a flat enough surface, perhaps with some flat stones that you can prop this on, but it does need to be set up above the ground so you don't want it sinking into the grass. Let me talk you through just for a minute the number of charcoal briquettes that we're using. I always want to use more than enough, because when you are using just the right number, you're going to find something goes wrong. Remember, 2 is 1 and 1 is none? Well, always light more than you need, because you can always scoot some over if you don't need all of the briquettes. But for our purposes today, we need about, just approximately, 30 briquettes. You're going to just build a pyramid with these charcoal briquettes. And as we get near the top, we're kind of making a little nest of sorts in the middle so that we can jam that fire starter right down into the middle. And if possible, of course, it would be nice if we could put a few briquettes right on top of it. But as we light that, it's going to ignite all of those briquettes slowly and pull that heat and that fire all the way down to the bottom of the stack. And we're going to get this really well lit and then just let it go for about 15 minutes. You'd never want to cook over an open fire where it's just the flames, because surprisingly, those are cooler most of the time. If it's that nice golden flame, those are cooler than the charcoal briquettes once they have burned down into that kind of gray ashy stage, which is what we want them to go down to before we even start cooking on it. After about 15 minutes of that, we're going to spread these out. And what you want when you're baking, we want all the heat around the outside perimeter. We don't want any right in the middle of the bottom. We're going to want most of the heat on top, like I said. So, boy, that is heat, a lot of heat. I'm going to get my gloves on here so that my hands are protected from the heat. And before I go any further on this, let me just pop you over here to see this. So this is a 12-inch Dutch oven, and the one thing you always have to remember is you have to have whatever you put inside lifted up off the bottom. So this little trivet that we've put in here is going to be invaluable at keeping this from burning. That's an important secret that you cannot do without. So I put that right in the middle, and I've got my pie prepared. Again, this is the one that was just, frozen. And to make it special, of course, I had to put a little bit of egg white over the top of it and some milk, egg wash, and then a little sprinkle of sugar, or sprinkle of cinnamon and sugar, so that it feels a little bit more homemade. Also, I've chosen a slightly petite sized pie, so there's at least an inch all the way around the outside before it gets to the edge of this. The heat is going to radiate, but I don't want it up next to the edge. And then I just put on the lid. Okay, to make this easy, I'm going to go ahead and put the coals on top of this before I set the coals around the base of it. People who like to get fancy with this you can make your little design so that it's this perfect balance of everything. Usually I just stuff it up here until I've got about 20 coals on top. Also, you can preheat your Dutch oven. That's going to be very beneficial to you. If I would have put that in the heat first so that the actual time would be shortened once we get the pie inside, that would have helped a lot. I didn't do that this time. But there I've got my coals that are going to be around the edges. Looks good to me. And I'm going to go ahead and set this right there, nestled on top of those. All right. Now, if I had preheated this, I can promise you that it would have gone closer to more like, 30 to 40 minutes. This is going to take up to an hour, just so you know the way I've got it, because this wasn't preheated. And that's okay, you can do it either way. But I will put probably a couple of extra briquettes here and there on this, and that's going to help. They will slowly light, slowly turn hot themselves. They will not be the same temperature as the others. But like I said, I've got approximately 20 on top, 10 on the bottom in a ring. Some people get really scientific. They'll place the charcoal briquettes in an exactly symmetric type way so that the heat is always perfectly distributed. Some people say that if you let the charcoal briquettes touch each other, then you'll get hot spots on the top of whatever you're trying to cook inside. I haven't really experienced that. As long as it's relatively spread out and even and not clumped up in one area and missing in another, you should be just fine. Now, remember this, if I was going to broil something, think this through with me. If I was going to broil in this, obviously you want all the heat on top, so you just put every single briquette on top. If I was going to only fry, like if I wanted to do bacon or eggs or pancakes or something in the bottom, I only need heat on the bottom. So you tuck every one of those briquettes under the bottom and have nothing on top. Those are two easy rules that way. But anytime you're baking, breads, pies, pizzas, anything else you would put inside to bake, I want you to try and remember that rule of 2/3 on top, 1/3 on the bottom. Now, some folks will have a slightly different ratio. Everybody has their own version, and I will say it varies greatly depending on the weather, the humidity, how much the wind is blowing, how cold it is outside versus how hot it is. You're going to have to take all those into account. So it may not be exactly as I say when you do your version of this. If you're in the middle of winter, it's not going to be the same as me doing it in the spring in Tennessee. But adjust accordingly and play around with it until you get it just right for what you're working with. And now you're going to wait, and you have to be patient. Promise that you remember to not keep checking it, because every time you lift the lid off, you're going to notice a huge amount of that heat escapes, and you need every bit of it conserved for this. It will go faster and more reliably. Now, I do want you to come out, and every 15 minutes that you're cooking, anything that you're cooking over in a Dutch oven, I want you to turn the whole thing. You can do a 1/4 of a turn every 15 minutes is kind of how I remember it. I'll turn the base of it about a 1/4 of a turn every 15 minutes, and I'll turn the lid of it about a 1/4 of a turn the opposite direction every 15 minutes. There's no perfect science to that. What you're just trying to do is, if there is any amount of heat that is really hitting one spot hard, kind of just distributes it and evens it all out over the course of the time. All right, it's been about 1 hour and 20 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, and the coals have all started to cool down quite a bit, but oh, does that smell good. Look at that. It's beautiful. Now let me tell you how I cheated, just a smidgen so you know what to do. In a Dutch oven, it might be a little bit difficult to get that perfect golden top on, and if you are worried about that, you can do what I did, which is what Grandma would have done. And I took and whisked up just 1 egg and about a tablespoon of milk, a splash of milk, and I put that all over the top, kind of like a little egg wash, before I put the pie in, and sprinkled it with some cinnamon and sugar, and that always gives it this nice home-baked goldeny look. And it smells incredible. But let's get this out of here if I can without dropping it. Ooh, look at that. I think it's time for a taste test, don't you? I have been waiting for this moment for the last several hours, and I finally get to taste test this wonderful looking pie. It did cook perfectly. I don't see anything about it that I can complain about. Nothing is burned. My mouth is watering just trying to wait for my first bite. I want to encourage you, if you have not purchased a Dutch oven yet, go on over to PREPSTEADERS.com, because I'm going to have a link over there that just has a little bit more information that's going to help you know what size you might want to buy for your family. Of course, I recommend a good quality brand or even an old antique version that you might get at an antique store. But get yourself a Dutch oven. It is a worthy investment, and you're going to be thanking yourself and using it the whole rest of your life. All right, it's time for me to enjoy my pie. I hope you take the time to share this with somebody that you love, and join us again next week. Until then though, will you take a moment and go out and find somebody to be a blessing to today? I'll see you next time. God bless you. In the Holy Bible, this is out of 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 10 and 11. It says this, "And after you have suffered a little while, the God of all grace, who has called you to his eternal glory in Christ, will himself restore and confirm and strengthen and establish you. To him be the dominion forever and ever. Amen." Now go spread the word